Sexual assault investigation lands one of the members of Pawn Stars in trouble. Austin Russell, better known as Chun Li, is in jail tonight.
God, you just never see the OD coming, you know what I mean? So, yeah, you want to give him tough love and everything, but I never thought that would happen.
Rick Harrison, what's going on with him? Things aren't as easy as they used to be, and he's now surrounded by unexpected shadows after years of enthralling viewers with Pawn Stars. Rick finds himself in a precarious situation as the light at the end of the tunnel reveals a slew of dubious occurrences and hidden truths. Everything is beginning to show flaws that not even he can fix, from contentious decisions to circulating rumors. Can the Pawn Stars star still survive this unknown story? It will make you question everything. Rick Harrison once stood tall and proud under the glittering lights of Sin City, where hopes and ambitions are traded for cash and fame. His dazzlingly illuminated pawn shop, Gold and Silver, had become more than simply a place of commerce. It was now the hub of a television empire known as Pawn Stars. The shelves were brimming with unusual objects. Rick, with his self-assured grin and keen eyes, was a TV staple, the guy who could provide an instantaneous appraisal of an antique and enthrall audiences with fascinating tales of the past. An iconic figure in the Nevada desert, he was known as the Pawn King and was able to turn worn-out objects into valuable currency. But now that the limelight is starting to go, those perfect details are starting to show. And Rick Harrison's narrative isn't what it used to be, a heroic epic. On a morning in March of 2025, abrupt, brief communications swept over X like desert winds, and everything started to change. Rick Harrison is in a serious jam, one person said, adding the mysterious hashtags #Ami, #PawnStarsTrouble, and #RickDownfall. From nebulous accounts of personal troubles to murmurs of legal troubles, the rumors spread like wildfire. The actual nature of the events remained unknown, but the once lauded reputation of Rick Harrison, a name associated with brilliance and success, was suddenly cloaked in suspicion. The people who had been captivated by his televised negotiations started to question what had become of the man who had seemingly control of everything. Did the glimmering light of silver and gold begin to fade, or was this only a temporary change before things went back to normal? A tragic reality, though, that Rick was unable to hide, lay beneath those stories. The loss of his son Adam to fentanyl overdose in 2024 was something Rick never believed he would be able to recover. In an emotional interview with Fox News, Rick revealed his agony, saying, "It's a pain you can't describe." A distraught parent with red-rimmed eyes and heavy shoulders from silent grief, he had transformed into a father before the cameras. Instead of the mighty hero from Pawn Stars, the audience witnessed Rick as a regular guy dealing with the emotional ups and downs of life. After suffering that loss, Rick's spirit was consumed by a smoldering fire, and he began to progressively distance himself from the limelight that had formerly had immense significance for him. The alteration was eventually noticed by others. Rick, who was formerly a regular on Pawn Stars, thanks to his charismatic personality and hilarious anecdotes, was suddenly noticeably absent. Viewers couldn't help but notice that the show's new episodes lacked his charisma. A number of people started asking, "Where's Rick?" on various internet forums. Is he now giving up? Others suspected more sinister motives, while some insisted he was just recuperating from a traumatic experience. Rick's disappearance was more than simply a voiceless character. It was the initial warning that his empire could be in danger of collapsing. Once teeming with fans and visitors, the pawn store now appeared muted, as if it too felt the impending storm. Every day, more details were added to the speculations about X, but none of them could be confirmed. While some whispered that Rick had lost himself in the anguish of losing his kid, others alleged that he was the target of a massive lawsuit. One thing was evident, though. Rick Harrison's beautiful image was eroding, whatever that may be. His formerly unstoppable Pawn King abilities had worn off, and he now found himself at a crossroads, the past fading into shadows and the future unknown. Rick seemed to be plunging into the shadows while the lights of Las Vegas remained dazzling, a gloom from which he could neither assess nor maneuver his way out. Those who had formerly looked up to him quietly wondered if this was the last straw for the once proud icon of achievement. There was an eerie quietness in the pawn store, which had been the beating core of Rick Harrison's enterprise, where fascinating tales and interesting antiquities were traded under his watchful eye. Everything seemed the same. The shelves were still stocked and the signs were still lit, but there was a change in the man standing behind them. Rick Harrison, who was once an icon of strength and cunning, appeared to be descending into an uncontrollable abyss. Rumors started circulating, not only in Las Vegas but throughout the entire internet, like dust from the desert that obscured the once brilliant brilliance. A little flame was kindled, and it quickly became an inferno, by word of the gold and silver pawn shop's financial woes. No longer were there throngs of people waiting to see the Pawn King or pose for pictures with the Pawn Stars. The recognized faces that had brought in so many customers, according to those who worked there. Some said it was because people were still reeling from personal tragedies. For example, the public's opinion of Rick was severely damaged by the tragic death of his son, Adam. There was an unsettling quiet as customers abandoned their quest for a taste of the American dream, and no official numbers were announced. Everyone could hear the rumblings and start to wonder, was Rick's corporate empire about to crumble? However, problems persisted outside the store. Rick, in an unusual interview with the New York Post, spoke out about a dark side of his personality, a side he had previously hidden behind his self-assured smile and humorous TV comments. His voice quivered as he cried out, "It got really, really bad." His words conveyed more than a father's sorrow. They sounded like a man afflicted by crippling guilt. As Rick reflected on his actions, he couldn't help but wonder about the times he could have spent with Adam rather than tending to the business or shooting. His once clear vision, impaired by restless nights and unresolved concerns, now obscured his ability to appraise rare items. People saw a different Rick Harrison in those words. Not the unstoppable pawn shop owner, but a guy giving in to his problems. Speculation of internal strife at Pawn Stars caused the fissures to expand. It wasn't long ago that Rick's eldest son, Corey Harrison, and his comedic sidekick Chumlee were showstoppers. People were whispering that they were now siding with Rick's opponents. Rumor has it that following the family tragedy, Corey was unhappy with Rick's management of the store, and Chumlee wanted to go out on his own, according to unverified ex-sources. While Rick's absence in the most recent episodes did not provide any concrete proof, it did heighten suspicions. Pawn Stars fans, who had before adored the three men's relationship, started to fret that the show may crumble. Was the on-screen family breaking up just like Rick's actual family? Public opinion was like a huge stone pressing down on Rick's shoulders. The reputation he had worked so hard to establish was being sliced to shreds by every rumor, story, and suspicious look from the public. Once fearless, he now prefers to stay out of the spotlight and avoid television altogether. Days when he wasn't handling gold and silver were indicators of a guy progressively releasing himself from the limelight that had formerly consumed him. With his business in shambles and many unresolved problems in his wake, Rick appeared to be fading into oblivion while the neon lights of Sin City continued to gleam. Was the man once known as the Pawn King about to meet his demise? Or was this only a passing storm? As a terrible rumor spread over X like wildfire in the dead of night in late March 2025, that Rick Harrison had been condemned to life in prison, the already gloomy mood in Sin City took on an even darker tone. Like a hammer blow to his legacy, a short status update followed by the hashtag #LagaPawnStars downfall hit him. The truth quickly spread, shattering the Pawn King's realm and the confidence of those who had trusted him. But no one understood from where it had come. A mystery YouTube video had recently appeared, setting off a ticking time bomb of rumors. This rumor was no ordinary bit of gossip. An unidentified, low-volume voice claimed in the more than 10-minute video that Rick Harrison's pawn store was involved in illegal activity. Unsettlingly confidently, this man detailed how gold and silver was more than simply a spot to trade antiques. It was a center for illicit dealings, involving everything from the trafficking of commodities with questionable provenance to covert deals with unscrupulous groups. There was enough ambiguity caused by the video's lack of proof, No photos, no papers, just cold allegations. No one could know for sure if it was true or not. But now Rick Harrison's name was the center of a tornado of suspicion, not triumph. People who had flocked to him on Pawn Stars were now divided along ideological lines. For some, this rumor represented the final chapter in Rick's long history of hidden secrets. They said he had gone too far when they brought up the shop's recent financial troubles, his odd TV absence, and even family tragedies. No matter what happened, Rick Harrison's reputation was ruined. Now that he was a man under suspicion, his name was associated with unsolved mysteries, and he was no longer the successful businessman who formerly commanded attention with a confident grin and strong handshake. People on internet forums started to scrutinize his background with suspicion, focusing on the instances when he had joked about breaking the rules or displayed unusually valuable objects on Pawn Stars. Rick had spent his life creating a legacy that might be destroyed in an instant because of that YouTube video, which, despite its lack of evidence, had sown a deadly seed in people's minds and was spreading every day. His formerly proud gold and silver pawn shop became a symbol of his demise, not due to the goods it sold, but to the secrets its customers thought it held. Rick Harrison seemed to have faded into oblivion while the neon signs of Sin City remained on. His complete lack of comment, in both interviews and responses, only served to bolster the rumors. Everyone was on the edge of their seats, waiting for the gavel to fall or hoping it was all a dream and he would soon wake up. No matter what happened, though, it was evident that the Pawn King's legacy had broken apart, and pieces were falling from the sky at an unpredictable pace. Rick Harrison appeared to have disappeared from the world he previously ruled, even as the lights of Las Vegas continued to shine brightly, as if they would never go out. The gold and silver pawn shop, which had been the setting for his astute bargaining and fascinating anecdotes about the past, was now only a speck in the minds of his admirers. Rick lost his cocky grin and menacing gaze after the terrible whirlwind of life sentence speculations. In the middle of his life's devastation, he was a broken man entangled in a web of private sorrow and societal distrust. Unendingly, the echoes of bygone glories echoed. However, these echoes were the cry of a spirit struggling to rise. Rick and those close to him were deeply affected by the unsubstantiated report of his life sentence. Rick opted for a heavy quiet, as if he lacked the power to oppose the overwhelming wave, while the public continued to debate postings on X and speculations persisted. Then, out of nowhere, he showed up, looking thin and his eyes droopy from lack of sleep. Instead than addressing the charges or the speculations in front of the cameras, he focused only on his son Adam, who had died from fentanyl overdose. Could I have prevented his death? His query trembled as if he were asking it to himself rather than the audience. It echoed in his thoughts like a melancholy, never-ending tune. Not the strong pawn shop owner, but a broken father whose anguish and guilt drove him to seek answers he knew he would never get, was the Rick Harrison that the world saw. Rather than putting an end to the rumors, that appearance just added fuel to the fire. After a life spent in the limelight and in the pawn shop, Rick decided to live a life of isolation. He supposedly escaped from Sin City and took refuge in a remote location in the desert, ensuring that no one could track him down. Customers who remembered Rick from their earlier visits to Gold and Silver complained that he was no longer behind the counter or that his rich, powerful voice was missing when he told tales about the antiques. Speculation circulated that he had abandoned the store, the program, and possibly himself. Rick Harrison is like a ghost now, one ex-user said. His whereabouts remain a mystery, and suspicions have circulated regarding his mental health. Do you think he was going further into the shadows, or is he just looking for a spot to hide his scars? Those who were close to Rick gave insight into his inner turmoil, even if they were reluctant to speak up. Every day, they said, Rick fought to keep his morale up in the face of public opinion pressure and the anguish of his loss. He had transformed from an irascible individual burdened by the recollection of Adam and the ceaseless allegations into someone who could no longer laugh at Pawn Stars and confront any obstacle head-on. An old acquaintance of Rick's disclosed that he frequently spent lengthy periods of time alone, perhaps attempting to relive happier times by perusing old family photographs. Despite the immense suffering, a ray of hope appeared in the depths of his being, not to rescue his career but to rescue himself. Although he remained silent, the look of exhaustion in his eyes conveyed a quiet resolve, the desire to confront the past and forge on even in solitude. Rick Harrison seems to have decided to distance himself from the still shining Las Vegas lights. In the midst of his fall, he sought something more important than fame, fortune, or even mental stability. He may never see his career or empire again. The populace eagerly observed him, pondering if the man who had previously reigned as the Pawn King could recover and go on, or if he would always be a distant echo in the expansive desert. It appeared as though Rick Harrison had embarked on one last risk, a game where success was far from assured. In the stillness of the desert breezes, the gold and silver pawn shop, once his seat of power, stood like a statue betraying the collapse of an empire. The heyday of Pawn Stars, when Rick strutted confidently behind the counter, eyes sharp as daggers, seemed like a distant memory now. Rick Harrison's invincibility as the Pawn King had been eroded by the onslaught of rumors, the anguish of losing, and the unhealable scars. At the end of his rope, he stood at the crossroads, his future clouded by doubt and the nagging question, could he dust himself off, or was this the last act of a monarch who had lost everything? There was growing skepticism about the veracity of the life sentence rumor that had previously been widely circulated on X. Some online commenters brought attention to the fact that the court had not issued any formal statement or released any official documentation verifying the terrible accusations. There was a growing consensus that the viral video on YouTube that had rocked Rick's world was nothing more than a made-up narrative. But even if the facts were to be revealed, Rick's image would have taken a hit, not in some made-up jail. His former fans, who had fallen in love with him on Pawn Stars, suddenly saw him in a new light. Others wept, mourning the loss of a man who had represented the American ideal in the past, while some turned their backs on him, accusing him of being dishonest. There was no physical prison for Rick. Instead, he appeared to be locked in an unseen prison of mistrust and despair from which he was unable to free himself. The show that catapulted Rick to fame, Pawn Stars, was now in danger of being canceled. People who were enthralled by his storytelling and negotiating skills eventually stopped watching. Even though Rick Harrison was the show's heart and soul, his name began to raise more eyebrows than adulation, and viewers lost interest in new episodes. Since no one was interested in watching the show, rumors circulated on internet forums that the network was thinking about canceling it. Even the once vibrant gold and silver pawn shop had fallen from grace, like a pawn king who had lost his crown. Once teeming with tourists eager to snap pictures and purchase trinkets, the store now seemed exhausted, as if it too had felt the disappointment. Even though they were still stocked, the shelves no longer conveyed tales of triumph, but rather served as reminders of a bygone age, a heritage that was fading away with each passing day. New rumors emerged amidst the wreckage. Rick was contemplating liquidating his holdings and stepping away from the entertainment sector altogether. Reportedly, he had conferred with brokers over his desire to relinquish gold and silver, Pawn Stars, and the limelight that had before had such significance for him. Rick, according to a family friend, was sick of fighting and wanted to just relax after years of dealing with the emotional fallout of losing his kid and the scrutiny from the general public. The individual confessed, "He's done," their voice betraying their deep concern. If such were the case, it would be the final chapter in the story of the Pawn King, a charismatic and talented man who transformed discarded objects into valuable jewelry. It was as if he were a monarch abdicating his kingdom to seek peace. All he wanted to do was walk away, leaving everything behind. A spark of optimism remained, even if Rick's future was as cloudy as the night sky. Even though his support base was shrinking, there were others who held out hope that he would emerge victorious. All they wanted was for him to find solace, a place to mend the profound emotional scars on his soul. They didn't anticipate him reclaiming his previous majesty or re-establishing his vanished kingdom. Rick Harrison remained solitary as the Las Vegas lights continued to illuminate his last wager. He had to decide whether to get back up on his feet or just let himself go. The exact answer was unknown. The Pawn King may have lost all of his material possessions, but the memory of a man who dared to dream large and saw his dreams come crashing down endures in the hearts of his admirers.